Hello everyone, my name is Caleb Hohenschel. I am the Director of Education here for FPTV, and thank you for tuning in to our first of what's going to be a series for Davinci Resolve and how to kind of work with the program and edit the videos that you want to create. So for the first time, we're going to be going through our basic editing class, which you can find the PDF form of on our website. That's faypublic.tv. But we're basically working with Davinci Resolve in the cut page, which is kind of the more stripped down, simplistic version of their more full-featured edit page and other workspaces that they have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on in. So when you open up Davinci Resolve and click on Untitled Project or just click on New Project, it'll bring you up to this workspace right here. This is the cut page. If it doesn't bring you up to this cut page, you can change back and forth between workspaces pretty easily just by clicking back and forth. So you have your media acquisition page over here, you have your edit page, Fusion, which is like VFX stuff, you have the color page, you have music, composition with Fairlight, and then you also have the deliver page over here on the far right, but we're going to be in the cut page for this one. To start off, you should see this guy. This is the media pool. This is where we're going to actually drop all of our assets into. So that could be anything from video to audio to music to graphics, anything along those lines. So with that said, let's go ahead and right click and import media, and it should bring us up a Windows File Explorer or a Mac File Explorer. And I apologize that you can't see this. I'm just going to go ahead and click and grab some materials I have. Sorry guys, the recording software that I'm using only records Davinci Resolve, and I can't really get it to work very well with everything else. But I think this will do us good for the most part. So up here in our media pool, we now have all of our clips that we can work with. If I want to group these and organize these, I can do that by right-clicking and then click Add Bin. So I can rename this. I can just make it like Scene 1, for instance. I don't really need this, but let's go ahead and just click and drag some of these clips in here. I'm just holding down the Shift key to select multiple clips and then drag and drop those into our bin, and now we have those grouped into a folder. But like I was saying, for this instance, I don't really think we need that, so I'm going to undo that a couple times. The shortcut, the keyboard shortcut for undoing is always Control-Z or Command-Z if you're on Mac. You can always find it up here, Edit, and then Undo, and it also gives you the keyboard shortcut for it. And that's a system-wide function, so you can do that with pretty much any application that you might be running on your PC or Mac. All right, so now you will notice that we have a top timeline here and then a bottom timeline. These actually do serve pretty much the same function. It's just that this top one is kind of a more expanded view of your entire timeline, whereas the bottom one is a more specific detail-oriented view. And if that doesn't make sense, don't worry, it will in just a second when we start getting into this. So let's go ahead and just grab this clip here. And I'm not really going to be editing for content here because that would take a little while. So let's say we want to start our clip right here. There's a lot of like camera shake and unnecessary time being spent on the front end here. So let's just start our clip maybe right here. To trim that front portion of the clip off, I can just hover over it with my mouse. I can either do it on the top or the bottom. I'm going to use the top for this instance. And I'm just going to click. You can see it gives me a little handle, and as I start dragging, it drags all that back, and then boom, I can line it up directly with my orange playhead. That was where I stopped the video. And now using my spacebar as a start and stop button, I can play it. So now Dan comes right into frame right when we need him to, and we don't have to mess with all the beforehand stuff. So let's play through this. I don't really want all this clip. I'm just going to maybe trim it down like so, maybe somewhere around there. That's pretty good. Again, I don't really want the whole clip. And yeah, that looks pretty solid. So let's run with that. So next, let's go ahead and grab another clip. So I see we have one up here. This looks pretty good. You can either stack it on top or you can put it behind. And again, you can do it either on the top or the bottom. They both do the exact same thing. It's just how you're viewing it, either in the top or the bottom, is the only differentiation. Let's play through this again using our space bar. And you can see me in the reflection right there. Perfect. I love it. So we don't need this portion. Again, we don't need this front portion of the clip. So let's say we want to cut into this clip right here. Well, the other way we can do this, in addition to trimming it, is we can also split it directly where the orange playhead is. that the playhead is this guy right here, or this guy. So we can split it right there, and then we can actually just delete either portion of the clip that we want. So let's go ahead and do that. So we will press the C key on the keyboard, and that will split this clip into 2 separate clips. I'm going to undo that and show you one more time. So anywhere we put this playhead at, we can click C, and that will split it into 2 independent clips. So now with that being done, I can either delete this portion or I can delete this portion. And you notice that when I deleted that, it automatically pushed everything back. It kind of rippled everything back. That's just kind of a simplistic time-saving device that it likes to use whenever you're going for like quick edits. So now we have this clip moving into this clip. And maybe we even want to tighten that up just a little bit more. I'm going to split it right there, delete that, and then let's check that out. There we go. Let me pan down to bow. Looks awesome. All right, so we don't need the rest of that, so I'm going to do the same thing here, just C, and then delete that portion. And while I'm at it, I should talk about saving really quick, because saving is a very overlooked portion of this. You can set up an autosave feature for Davinci, similar to pretty much every other editing system out there. So with that being said, I'm just going to click Control S. So Control S, that's your keyboard shortcut for saving, and it's going to ask me for a project title if I haven't already named one. So I'm going to do this, maybe just like basic editing. And that looks pretty good. I'll just leave it there. So I'll click Save. And the other way to do this, of course, would be just to go up to File and then Save Project As or Save Project. If you save Project As, it's going to save it as a different project, so I usually just go for the Save Project right there. All right, so with that being said, let's go to the last portion of this class that we cover with the media pool, and that is just double-clicking a clip actually brings it up over here, and this is called a preview window, and this is kind of just like a miniature version of the timeline, if you will. So for instance, let's find a good clip here, maybe like right here. This looks pretty good. So Dan and Bo come storming down the hallway and everything. So let's find this. I don't need this front portion, similar to pretty much all of our other clips. I don't really need the front portion of this clip. So let me just play through this. And probably right when they come around the corner right there, that's when I want to cut in. So I can do that just by clicking and dragging this guy to line up directly with my orange playhead. And now whenever I drag this clip into my timeline, it's actually going to omit the gray portion. So that gray portion is right here. I'm not going to be dragging in any of this. It's going to omit all of that. And this is a really great feature because if you're anything like me, I hate having to drag in a huge clip down into my timeline and then having to like cut it up and dice it and everything like that. It just really kind of disrupts my workflow. So I really like this. So let's go ahead and play through this. And right here, we can stop it, and we can do the same thing with the back portion of the clip too. So just by clicking and dragging this little tab, boom, that way it lines up directly to where my playhead was. And now I just have this portion that I am dragging in. Okay, so let's go ahead and click and drag this. I'm actually going to put this on top here. As you might notice, I can stack pretty much as many layers as I want to. And I think that this clip should maybe come before this other clip right here, because it kind of makes more sense chronologically to do that. So let me go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to click and drag these around, scroll on down this way, put that there, and then line that up. So I can flatten this all down to be all on the same track if I want to. So let's go ahead and do that. So just moving it down that way, and now we have this. So they're coming through the building and stuff, and then we cut directly into this. I think this could even be a little bit tighter. So let's like cut off maybe right here. So let's just trim this just up a little bit. As much of the excess fat that you can trim off these kind of clips, the better, I would say. All right, there we go. So I think that feels a little bit better. Let's do that one more time. I'm gonna show you guys one more thing with this. Let's find a good clip here. This one's pretty good. So again, I just double click and then we can scroll through this. So this lady is talking with her computer. And instead of just clicking and dragging this, the other thing we can do with this is once we find the spot that we want this clip to begin with, instead of clicking and dragging that, we can actually use 2 keyboard shortcuts to really simplify the workflow even further. So for the in point, I can click my I key, and for the out point, I can click my O key. So I for in, O for out, and that immediately snaps these 2 points directly to where my playhead is at that point in time. So let's go ahead and click I again, and now we have a very condensed version of this clip. So let's just go ahead and click and drag this down, and there we go. So now we have some nice, good looking colorful footage here. This was all shot at the television studio. So let's go ahead and save this again. And our timeline's looking good. So let's go ahead and check out the distinction a little bit more between these 2 timelines. Again, we have the top timeline, which is a very broad type of timeline view. And then we have the bottom timeline as well, which is a more specific view. So if I wanted to make some broad edits, I could do that up here. You know, I could do all kinds of crazy things, just moving clips around really fast. Or I can come down here to my second timeline, my bottom timeline, and do some really fine detail edits. So it's a pretty good way of giving you kind of both functionalities of a big timeline and a tiny, like, specific timeline at the same time. All right, so let's go ahead and check out transitions. So transitions are actually up here, and when I click on that, it gets rid of my media pool for the time being. The media pool is still there, so you can always just click back on it, and there your media pool is. I'm just gonna click on transitions here, and there are way more transitions than you probably ever really need for anything. I will say, although you do have like the star wipes and all those kind of like campy transitions, usually what is used in film, TV, video, anything like that, commercials, music videos, is just a simple cross dissolve. So I can do that just by clicking and dragging it down here. I can drag it on the top right there or on the bottom. And, oh, come on, there we go. All right. And whenever you cross dissolve from no clips into a clip, which is what we're doing here, let's go ahead and play that. It just fades up and it packages the video together very nicely. So let's do the same thing here on the end. Boom. If I scroll over here, and there you have it. So now we have a very nicely packaged together video. If you wanted to do a cross dissolve or another transition between 2 clips, it's actually pretty easy. So you want to find where 2 clips kind of butt up against each other, where they are touching, which is what we have right here, it looks like. So let's go ahead and click and drag a cross dissolve right there. You can do it over the rightmost clip, over the leftmost clip, or over them both equally. So let's do it over them both equally. Then you can also always trim it out and make it a long transition. So this is what that looks like. So very, very long, elongated transition. Or you can make it a really fast transition. So let's check that out here. So that's a very, very fast transition. But for this instance, I don't really think we need a transition here at all. It works pretty well as just like a hard cut, which is usually what you will see in both TV, film, video, and everything like that. So we just have hard cuts, and that's usually fine. All right, additionally, we do have audio transitions. We have a crossfade with plus 3 dB of compensation, a crossfade with minus 3 dB of compensation, which is, of course, like kind of fades it down a little bit as it crossfades, and then a crossfade with no compensation. So you can use those as you see fit. Then let's move on to titles. So titles are pretty simple in Davinci. They work about the same as pretty much every other editing system out there. Let's go ahead and just find one and drag it down. Titles work as their own separate layer in Davinci, which is nice. So let's just click and drag a text box down here. And you'll notice that now we have text on top of our video. We don't want to put the text underneath the video, because if we did that, the text would pretty much be invisible because it would be covered up by the video. So just to illustrate that, let's try this out. I'm just gonna put that up there, and then I'm gonna drag my text to where my text is underneath my video, and then trim it up here to where it fits in nice and neat. So now we have our video on top and our text on the bottom, and the text is not showing up because the video is fully covering it up. This timeline, as well as pretty much every other non-linear editing system like Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, Davinci, Avid, they all work from the top down, which is to say that just kind of envision this orange playhead as its own type of camera, and it's just looking down, and whatever it sees on top is whatever is going to take priority over whatever's on bottom. So you just want to be careful when you're placing text. You want to make sure that it is in fact above your video, otherwise it's not going to show up at all. So let's undo that really quick. I'm just going to Control Z a couple times, put that back there, and then just throw my text in right there. All right, cool. So now it's looking pretty good. I'm actually going to move this over here, I think. All right, really quick with text, you can put cross dissolves and transitions on it if you want to. So I'm just going to click on transitions. I'll do cross dissolve here and cross dissolve on the back end, and then this is what we have. But of course, we actually need to edit that text. So the way to do that is just a little bit confusing for people who are first-time editors. So bear with me here. I'm going to walk you through it. So with our layer selected, you can always tell which layer is selected by which has the orange outline here. So with my text layer selected, I'm going to go to the slider button or the tools button. I usually call it just the slider because it looks just like a bunch of little sliders right there. So I'm going to click the slider button, and then we have a couple different tabs that the slider button opens up for us. This one right here is the motion tab. We can move the text around, we can resize it, we can rotate it and all that kind of stuff. This guy right here is a reset button, so let's click that, and that resets everything back to the way it was when we first started it. We also have cropping. We have things like video stabilization, which we can't do, of course, which this is a text layer. So let's go over here all the way to T and then open inspector. And this is where we can actually manipulate this tile around. So let's do, this was called Upbeat, a short sketch. Yeah, that looks pretty good. You can cycle through a bunch of different types of fonts. I don't really know one that I like. That one looks okay, I guess. Of course, you can change the size of it and everything. What I do like to highlight whenever I'm teaching this class is both the drop shadow feature and the background feature. So let's check these out. So these are on by default. We just have to assign some values to them. So as you can see right here, we have an offset X value and an offset Y value. So just think back to maybe like 3rd or 4th grade math class where you were graphing like dots on a graph. So you have your X axis, which is horizontal, then you have your Y axis, which is vertical up and down. So with that knowledge, let's go ahead, it's already turned on. Let's go ahead and click and drag on our X axis. And as you can see, our drop shadow is starting to appear. We can either go left or right with it. I usually like to go right. And then same thing with Y. I like to give it a little bit of a Y axis nudge there too. And what that really does is it just contributes a lot to the readability of the actual title, because something like this one wasn't too bad, but very often you might see something happen where it's white text on a white background or black text on a black background. And that can become very, very difficult to read if you are a viewer who's not really accustomed to that kind of thing. So a drop shadow is really, really good to help the readability of your text. So here's with it off, you can see it there, and here's with it on. So that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and check out the background. So I'm going to turn this off. Background is the same thing as the drop shadow. It is turned on by default, but we just need to give it some values here. So looks like the width already has value. We just need to give it some height, and you can see it starting to appear there. And then width, boom. And that looks pretty good. I think that's nice. And it treats this all as its own layer because it is all condensed into one layer. You can separate them out if you want to, although that is a little bit more advanced feature. I'm just going to X out of this, and I can turn my tools off if I want to, although I do like to leave it on because it has a lot of functionality there, and I don't like having to toggle it on and off a bunch of times. So just keep that in mind. Really, it's whatever works for you and your workflow. So I'm going to leave it on for now, and let's talk about opacity. So opacity, some of you might know what opacity is already. Opacity is basically the transparency of the video or whatever layer you're working with. So to illustrate that, what I would like to do is just go ahead and grab another clip here. I'm just going to really quickly, using the principles we've discussed, I'm going to set my in and my out points here, just so that I have another video layer to work with. And I'm going to drag this down here on the top. So as you can see, keeping in mind the whole top-down approach, if I play through this, you're seeing that now this clip is overriding these two bottom clips. So with that in mind, let's go over here to Tools. So we're already selected on this, and now we have the Motion tab open, so we can move this around. Notice that you can see the other video underneath this top video whenever I move it around. So I can rescale this. I can kind of rotate it around and everything. I could even warp it. I could invert it and all that kind of stuff, just like that. I don't really want to do that right now. I want to head on over to the opacity. But before I do that, I should note really quick that there are a couple other options here. So we do have cropping. So cropping just allows you to do like a split screen, or you could even do like 3 screens in here. So I can crop from the left and the right. I can crop from the top and the bottom and all that kind of good stuff. I also have time remapping, so slowing stuff down or speeding clips up. and video stabilization. So this is really helpful if I shot some handheld video that was a little bit shaky. I can kind of stabilize it within this program. But on over here to the opacity, we have an opacity slider. So as I bring this down, you'll notice that it is showing through more and more to the clip underneath. And again, that's just because now this clip has about 50% opacity or somewhere around there. And whatever is underneath is showing through above because of that 50% transparency value that I gave it. And as you'll notice, it's showing through just to whatever's underneath. So it's not really partial to anything, it's just showing through directly down to whatever's underneath. All right, so now that we have our timeline built, we have our title in there, we put a couple transitions in there, we are now ready to go ahead and export our video. And if you don't know what exporting is, it basically just means we're taking all of the adjustments and all of everything that we've done to this, so our titles, our different video files and everything, and it's squishing them down and basically molding them into its own video file. So that's basically what exporting does. Let's go ahead and go up here to quick export. And you can send it either to YouTube or straight to Vimeo if you want to. I usually like to have an actual copy of the video, and I think that's pretty good practice overall. So we're gonna leave it on H.264, and H.264 is just basically a wrapper for a regular MP4 style video. So I'm gonna leave it on H.264, click export. It's gonna ask me for a location, and then I'm just going to click save, and I can rename it as well if I want to. I'm not going to rename it for this one, I don't think, but I can now export it, and hopefully you all are seeing this. And it usually does export pretty fast, especially with a pretty simple video like this. All right, so we are all finished up. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. From here, you can take that video file, that MP4 file, and put it up on YouTube. You can put it on Facebook, on Instagram, and all that kind of stuff. So again, thanks for tuning in, and be sure to look out for the next one. Next time, we're going to be going into our Intro to Davinci Resolve class, which is just a little bit more advanced style functionality with everything. So I'm excited to dive into it with y'all, and I will see